So hi everyone. So in the next 30 minutes, I will walk you through on how we uncovered a broad criminal ecosystem, which is behind one of the largest botnet, which is named Glupteba. So my name is Glupteba Nagy, and I'm working for Google as a security engineer. I'm working in Zurich in the threat analysis group, and I'm working in the crime team, where we are focusing on understanding and disrupting financially motivated threats, which are against Google and Google users. I just would like to note that Google disrupted Glupteba in 2021, December, and this talk is not really focusing on the disruption itself, but rather the findings and attribution which led us to disrupt the botnet and led us to file a lawsuit against the actors. So what I will talk about, it's actually Glupteba, which is a Trojan, a modular Trojan. I will cover the distribution, the capabilities, and the modules of it. Then I will talk about the actors behind who is operating Glupteba. And then I will talk about the services which they provide, like AWM Proxy, Trustpin, and Download.Farm. And at the end of the presentation, you should have an overview on how this ecosystem is formed by Glupteba, the actors, and the services. So Glupteba has been in the wild since 2011. It's distributed through pay-per-install networks and traffic distributor services. So generally, a user visits a website to download a cracked software, for instance, and it ends up downloading Glupteba. But we have seen many other landing pages, like a fake YouTube video downloader, or even like in a pop-ups download button, or like click here button, or even we have seen Google Docs, which has a URL and lead to download supposedly a software, but instead it downloaded Glupteba. And before the disruption, we estimated around 1 million bots for the desktop variants. Glupteba is also a rootkit. It's dropping kernel drivers. So for instance, it dropped Winmon kernel driver in order to unlink all the associated processes from the eProcess list for hiding themselves. It also dropping Winmon FS kernel driver for hiding its objects like the folders or its binaries from file operations by registering the FS filter callback function. And it's also dropping Winmon process monitor for monitoring and terminating more than 1,000 processes. These are actually like antivirus-related processes. Glupteba is also a backdoor. It has a wide range of functions for installing, updating, verifying, even hiding their processes, or even taking screenshots or requesting the configuration files or setting the configuration files. Glupteba is also very well known that it's using blockchain technology as a backup mechanism for updating their C2 servers. So the Glupteba binaries has embedded Bitcoin addresses, and there are AES keys in it. And it's checking whether there is a transaction sent from that address and whether there is an op-return field in it. This op-return field is actually an opcode for that scripting language which the transactions are using. And it just marks a transaction as an unexplainable output, but it can be leveraged for storing arbitrary data. So Glupteba is leveraging it because it stores its C2 server domain name, and it's AES GCM is encrypted, so the first 12 bytes is the initialization vector, and the last 16 the GCM tag, while the middle part is the encrypted domain name. And how is this monitored? It's actually, there is a GitHub public repository with full of default Electrum servers with IP or domain and port numbers, and Glupteba binary will check and connect there with the Electrum protocol and check that transaction, whether there is a transaction. Also, it has a hard-coded list of Electrum servers, so if GitHub link wouldn't be available, but it also checking git blockchain.com by a simple HTTP request for that wallet. The dropper also gained persistence, so it's using auto-run registries and also using the schedule task for launching and updating its application. And it's also spreading on the local network by Eternal Blue exploitations. Glupteba also using anti-virtual machine techniques. It's really frequently was updated for looking for specific files and folders. And it's, as you have seen in the kernel driver parts, they really invest a great effort into self-defense. So they suppress the security by adding some Windows Defender exclusions or fiber rules for allowing inbound connections. And also disable PatchGuard DSE. This is also needed for the kernel drivers. So it's dropping some public tools for disable PatchGuard and DSE, like an old VirtualBox kernel driver with an exploit. But all about this, why I would say Glupteba is a diverse botnet is because it has many different modules. These are just the most prevalent ones, but there are much more. But Glupteba focusing a lot on the proxy components. So it has a tunnel proxy and a WebRTC proxy too. It has router exploiter components for targeting Netgear and MikroTik routers and turn them into proxies also. It has Chrome extensions, which can inject advertisement on websites, or browser stealer, many browser stealer modules. A Chrome fingerprinting module, which just create a hash from the Chrome, and also it checks whether there is WebRTC enabled in that Chrome. And it can drop miners, both CPU or GPU based, depending on which is more efficient on that host. And we also found Android variants of Glupteba, which I will talk about later. But let me just deep dive into just some of those modules, which better understanding helped us to associate them into some entities. So for instance, this is the tunneled proxy, which when downloaded for the victim machine, at the moment it will start register itself to the server as an available proxy node. And this bot registration is actually a DNS request with that specific pattern, which is really specific for Glupteba. It's based on GUID, server, a digit, and the domain. And that then it will connect to that IP on the port 8000, and the server responds with a random port number, and they will start establish the connection on that IP port. And from that point, this server will become a tunnel. So the requester machine will use this as a tunnel, and all the traffic will go through on the C2 server, forwards to the victim machine, and the victim machine IP will be the IP of that proxy user, actually. As I mentioned, we have found Android variants. These are actually not as prevalent as the desktop variants, but and these were sideloaded from Dodgy APK downloader site, not from Play Store. And these were very similar to the desktop variants, so they have proxy modules, and they had ads module, which I will talk now, because these ads modules were just displaying disruptive advertisements. Disruptive advertisements mean they did it in an unexpected way. So in this case, they hide the closing button, so it was bothering. And they sent a request to the server with many information from the user, and this the server responds with the URL and with that JSON, which you can see, and that trustpin.com domain contains the advertisement, which will be displayed on that application. The browser stealer module is just one sentence about it, that it's located the Chrome profile folder, which has all the cookies and histories. It's capable to decrypt password cookies, and it uploads everything to the server. And yeah, if we check these different modules, it raises the questions because these are very different in behavior. and like it raised the question where these are monetized. So we try to find the answers, and what we firstly find out and led us to answer the question is that we found the threat actors behind. And on the left side, you can see the Glupteba binaries, some binaries associated with Glupteba. On the middle, you can see some Git URIs, which were left in these binaries. And the reason is that these are Go-like binaries, and in Go, you can give an import not only as a relative path, but as a full URI, remote path. And these Git repositories are private Git repos without any reference really there. And these are like git.voltronworld.com/olivedev. This was left in a proxy, WebRTC proxy module. And then there was the module methods of that binary. And this git.voltronworld.com resolved an IP in a period to the same as gitlam.com. I suspect the gitlam.com is the old Git servers of them, because this let us find the Android modules, and this gitlam.com was embedded in some really old Glupteba droppers too. But the main point from this whole figure is rather that git.voltronworld.com led us to find Voltron, which is the developer team of Glupteba. And let's check what other services they provide besides developing Glupteba. It's not, okay. So actually what we firstly found is that there were some job description for Voltron work. This you can see on the left up side. They invited developers to trustpin.com. This is their website. And there was an email, nana@voltronworld.com, and the address. So we checked what is trustpin.com. Trustpin.com contact page also listed two registered company behind them, Prestige Media LLC and Invest Auto. One of them is a Russian, one is a US-based company. And we also could associate this with Voltron. And Prestige Media LLC is a company which we could associate with many other services. I only listed these three ones, which I want to talk about later, a little bit more. But there are much more, which if you want, you can read on our complaint. But there are others, like payment fraud related services, which were built on top of these services. So what are these services? Because it's interesting that there is a proxy provider, there is an advertising network service, and there is an account service. And if you remember, for the different modules, this is quite a match, because we know that Glupteba focusing a lot on the proxies. They have advertising modules. Also, they have ads module on Android, and this TrustPin advertising network they said it exists on Android platform. And they have many browser stealer components. And Don.farm is an account service, which they say that they provide real accounts. Let's deep dive into some of them, like AWM Proxy. That's a residential proxy provider, which it's one of the biggest one, with its more than 300,000 nodes, and it's also in the top 3 web scraper for Google search. And how does a proxy provider works like AWM Proxy? So if you are a customer of AWM Proxy, you will receive an IP port number which you have to set in order to access the proxy node. That will be the proxy gateway IP and port. And then you will have an assigned IP address from the IP pool, and you can use that IP as an anonymous connection. And this figure is quite similar what we have seen at Glupteba, because if you remember, the victim machine will register itself as an available proxy node, and from that point, the C2 server will be a tunnel, or let's say proxy gateway. So the requester machine will redirect all the traffic on the C2 server. And this is what we have learned, actually, that the IP addresses which AWM provide list as a proxy gateway. Those IP addresses had a huge overlap with Glupteba IP addresses, which were resolved to that bot registration pattern, if you remember, that GUID server and digit and domain. So yeah, it means that if that IP is the proxy gateway, is the C2 server of that proxy module, then probably the proxy pool of AWM proxy has victim machines of Glupteba installed with this tunneled proxy module. Tropswing is an advertising network. They said that they are a real-time bidding advertising network. It means that they sell and buy advertisement based on impressions. Impressions means like some information from the user, like the geolocation or what website it visited. And this is how it looks like. There is a publisher. For instance, it's an owner of an application which makes the decision it will advertise on their application. And there is the acquisitor. There will be sent information and request to an ad server based on these informations. And the server forwards a bid request to the advertisers who all wants to advertise their content. So they will bid for this request, and the ad server makes the decision which advertisement should be displayed in that application based on those requests. And this is also familiar to us because in the ads module we have seen that this is what the Glupteba module does, sends many information, and it will respond with a URL which hosts that advertisement, and that will be displayed. And this is actually what we have learned, that they are using totally the same infrastructure. And like we are talking about Tropspin, and these ads modules are using click.tropspin.com. So actually this means that we could identify that Tropspin.com is operated by the same actors as the actors who are developing Glupteba. So they are monetizing through their own services. Let's check the last one, Don.farm, who is, it's very well documented publicly because they have a blog, they had many customers on forums who complained about their services. And what they said from themselves that they sell real users only. That's the name is coming from, I guess, tool that Don.farm, that they don't farm accounts. They don't create new accounts from scratch and start warming it up or farm it. Rather, they have somehow real users. But they also said they does this because they want to support black hat advertisements on Google Ads, Twitter, or Facebook, because they have some solution for evading being blocked if you want to advertise something illicit. And they said that they give you a virtual machine with the settled up browser with a proxy which points to the same location as the account. So this is how it should look like. There is the customer who wants to access their virtual machines. They also told that it can be accessed by RDP or from the browser. And they have the settled up browser with that Chrome profile folder which has that right account details. And they have a proxy server set up, and you can use as a customer to access Google Ads for advertising something which probably should be blocked. And this is also what we have learned, that the account sold by Don.farm was stolen by Glupteba. So it's again, and also we learned that they are using AWM proxy, which we also learned that they are using Glupteba victim machines. So it's again just means that we could identify the actors who are developing Glupteba, and they are developing the service where they are monetizing it. So just let me summarize what I was talking that there is Glupteba with its different modules, and we could identify the actors who provide some other services like AWM, Proxy, Tropspin, or Don.form, and we have learned that these services are heavily rely on the different modules of Glupteba, and these services are used for monetizing the Glupteba modules. So as I mentioned, that Google disrupted in last December this botnet, and right after we disrupted, we have seen that they started again registering their domains. They started using the blockchain backup mechanism also, which I mentioned, which was the main reason why this Glupteba botnet cannot be disrupted technically. They sent some transactions with new domains, but we could react quite fast. So they were quiet until May, and the overall botnet size decreased less than its quarter from 1 million. They also went away from Google products, and we could partially disrupt the services, partially because, for instance, AWM Proxy, we've seen that they have new domains registered, but for instance, Don.form announced they are closing their business, or even Tropspin. And since May, we didn't see new distribution, but since May, we have seen that they started relaunching some operations, and they started using integral pay-per-install network, and the botnet size is slightly but increasing. They have new TTPs with Bitcoin, some new Bitcoin addresses. They are not using EES encryption for the blockchain, but simply XOR encoded. They're using Onion domains as the C2 servers, and using Discord for downloading Tor. And they are dropping, it's just recently we observed that they started dropping Opera VPN instead of their own proxy. So what we have learned from this year-long investigation is that Glupteba actors make mistakes, which can lead us to identify the threat actors. We also, the technical part of this investigation gave us an insight into how diverse a botnet can be, but the attribution part, that how diverse the usage of a botnet can be, and to leverage a botnet. And we also learned that the Glupteba actors are running a really complex and organized ecosystem where they parallel work on developing the Glupteba botnet and parallelly building around these services. And they have an end-to-end solution for this monetization. And this is kind of differ from the other less sophisticated actors who are just, for instance, exfiltrate data and pass it forward or darknet, and don't really invest effort to the monetization part, and they just sell and not reuse and use it. And from the disruption, we also studied that they can relaunch their operation, they can change TTPs. So this is still an evolving threat, which TAG continues monitoring. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Luca. I think we have time for one question, maybe. If someone has a question, raise your hand. The microphone will come to you.
Hi, Luca. So you talked a lot about the advertising network that was part of this, and obviously Google is, itself an, advertising network, and it's sort of interfering with their business. But we didn't see any of the ads that were being delivered through their network. You said that they were advertising for criminal services or something, or what were the kinds of ads that people would see delivered through the Glupteba network, and how did they differ from what you'd see on a legitimate ad network?
Yeah, actually, as I mentioned, this ads module was, it was not as prevalent, and the ads module which we found, the Android variants, were from historical data. So it was from 2018 around. And we didn't really observe what they advertised. We just realized that we just could associate with the advertising network.
Hey, we can, I think, another question?
Hi. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was really nice. I have a question. Do you have any information on in what countries or regions you found infrastructure for the botnet?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Do you have any information on the countries or regions in which you found the botnet infrastructure?
Yeah, it's you can find our complaint, and we associated the actors involved from work, which is a Russian-based company. I'm not sure what is in our complaint. You can check about the infrastructure. So I would take it this question was offline before I check what is in our complaint about it.
Maybe we'll squeeze in one more question. Any more questions? Not seeing any? Okay. Everybody, please join me in thanking Luca for her wonderful presentation.